Mrs. Yates, please try to keep your breathing steady. This. On the screen, grainy black and white images shifted as the probe glided slowly across her gel-slicked abdomen. The young technician's brow furrowed deeper with each pass. She kept checking the equipment settings, then glancing nervously at the closed door of the exam room, as if confirming they were alone. Dr. Walsh, could you come take a look at this? Right now. Within moments, a silver-haired physician strode in and took the probe from her hands. He stared at the screen for a long stretch, his finger tracing back and forth over several pulsing points of light. His breathing visibly quickened. That's not possible, he murmured, then turned sharply to face Clare Yates on the exam table, his eyes wide with disbelief. Mrs. Yates, you said you'd been diagnosed at multiple clinics, severe bilateral fallopian tube blockage. No chance of natural conception? Claire's stomach dropped. Her nails dug into her palms. Not this question again. For 4 months now, that diagnosis had been the recurring nightmare she couldn't wake from. But today, the doctor's expression was different from any she'd seen before. That's right, she managed, her voice dry as paper. 3 different fertility centers, including the Regional Reproductive Institute. So what are you telling me? Dr. Walsh drew a long breath and pointed at the screen. His hand was trembling. 30 years in medicine, and he'd never seen anything like this. Mrs. Yates, I need you to stay calm when I tell you this. He paused, weighing each word as if it were made of lead. You're not just pregnant. You're 1 year earlier. Seattle. Clare had never imagined the word infertile would become the dividing line of her life, the thing that kicked her off the cloud she'd been walking on and into the mud below. She and Mitchell Sutton had been married 5 years. The first 3 brought polite hints from his parents. By year 4, came the unsubtle nudges, the supplement recommendations, the miracle specialists his mother kept forwarding articles about. By year 5, the whole flavor of their marriage had soured. Clare, Mom found another specialist. Some functional medicine guy in Portland. She says this one's the real deal. Mitchell set a paper bag of supplements on the coffee table, his tone leaving no room for refusal. The bottles inside rattled. Claire's stomach churned. This was the 7th regimen this month, each one promising results, each one leaving her nauseous and depleted. Mitch, I really can't do another protocol right now, she said, pressing her temples. Dr. Chen warned me last week that my body needs a break. I can't keep cycling through these. Dr. Chen. Mitchell's voice climbed the way it always did now. If her Western medicine actually worked, would we be 5 years in with nothing to show? Do you know what my mother said on the phone today? She said the Sutton name doesn't end with me. That's what she said. There it was. The phrase he kept returning to like a knife to a wound. So this is my fault, Clare said quietly, looking up at him. The same man who'd told her, a lifetime ago, that he didn't care about kids as long as he had her. Now his eyes held nothing but resentment and impatience. Mitchell looked away, his voice softening but the meaning behind it sharpening. Nobody's saying it's your fault. But facts are facts, Clare. We have to face reality. Mom mentioned her cousin's daughter, she's young, healthy, just finished her master's. Mitchell. Clare stood so fast the room tilted. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm saying. He stood too, almost relieved to finally let it out. I'm saying we don't have to pin everything on one outcome. You need to think about this family. About my parents. They're getting older. Is it a crime that they want a grandchild? The fight ended the way most of them did now, Clare slamming the bedroom door and sliding down against it as the tears came. The wedding photo still hung above the dresser. In it, Mitchell was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. 5 years. How had it changed so completely? From that night on, the house turned cold. Mitchell came home late or didn't come home at all. His mother's calls multiplied, and the script shifted from concerned to openly accusatory. Clare, honey, I'm not trying to hurt you, but a woman who can't have children, well, she's not really fulfilling her end of things, is she? Mitchell is our only son. My friend Margaret knows a specialist in Phoenix who works miracles. Of course, his treatment requires very specific donor material. Oh, never mind, you wouldn't have access to that anyway. Karen's daughter-in-law gave her twins last spring. Boy and a girl. Some women just have that gift, you know? Each comment landed like a needle dipped in something corrosive. Claire moved from arguing back, to silence, to a dull numbness. She had tried. God, she had tried. 5 years of clinics, hormone protocols, 2 rounds of IVF that failed and nearly landed her in the with ovarian hyperstimulation. She'd spent months feeling like a science experiment. The final verdict from the specialist at Swedish, severe bilateral tubal occlusion. Natural conception extremely unlikely. IVF success rate, given your response, under 5%. She had thought, somehow, that going through hell together would buy them grace. That Mitchell would see her pain and meet her in it. But in his family's ledger, her suffering didn't count for much against an empty nursery. The thing that finally broke her was a text thread she found on Mitchell's phone. The contact was saved as this Lacey project team. The message was a photograph of a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Mitchell's reply, sent at 9:47 the night before, babe, are you serious? Hold tight, I'll handle things at home. Moving as fast as I can. And below that, don't worry about her. She can't produce, she's got no leverage. The down payment on the house came from my parents, the equity is mine. She walks away with not much. You and the baby are what matter now. Claire stood in the kitchen at 2 a.m. holding his phone, and she felt every drop of blood in her body go still. So all of it, the supplements he kept pushing on her, his mother's cruelty, the months of cold shoulders, he'd already lined up his exit. He'd probably had it lined up for months. She didn't cry. She didn't throw anything. She screenshotted everything calmly, emailed it to herself, and put the phone back exactly where she found it. Mitchell came home the next evening with an unfamiliar lightness in his step. He even smiled at her, which she hadn't seen in months. Claire, can we talk? She was on the couch, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour earlier. Sure. What did you want to talk about? How you're going to make sure I'd walk away with not much, so you can clear room for Lacey from the project team and your incoming child? His face froze, then went through 3 colors in 2 seconds. You went through my phone? I didn't have to. It was face up on the counter. Claire set the cup down on the glass coffee table. The clink sounded very loud. Mitchell, 5 years. I gave you 5 years and tried everything for your family. You wanted a child. I understood that. But this is beneath you. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe this is exactly who you are. Beneath me? Mitchell's voice cracked upward. If you weren't broken, would I be in this position? I'm a normal man. Is it a sin to want my own kid? Look at you, you're a ghost in this house, walking around like everything is a tragedy. What man could live with that? There it was again. Her infertility was the original sin, and everything else, her grief, her exhaustion, her quietness, just downstream symptoms. Then let's get divorced, Claire said, and her voice was perfectly steady. She looked him in the eye and there was nothing in her face but a frozen lake. Assets split per state law. I have the texts. I have audio of the things your mother has said to me over the past 2 years. I have receipts. If you don't want this to get ugly, we settle. Every dollar I'm entitled to. Not a penny less. Mitchell hadn't expected calm. He'd expected tears, begging, a meltdown he could use against her. He stood there, mouth open. The Claire in front of him had a blade behind her eyes, and he'd never noticed she carried one. You set me up, he said finally. Compared to what your family's been doing? This is just self-defense. Claire pulled a folded packet from her bag and laid it on the table. A draft separation agreement. You have 3 days. After that, my attorney calls yours. She walked into the bedroom and started packing. The day Claire moved out, Mitchell's mother showed up at the apartment. The older woman stood in the doorway with an expression that wasn't guilt, more like relief at watching deadweight finally get hauled away. Claire, sweetheart, don't take it the wrong way. It's just not in the cards for you. Better to part ways now, before you waste any more of Mitchell's good years. And those assets, try not to be greedy. A woman alone doesn't need much. Claire pulled her suitcase past her, didn't answer, and turned to Mitchell, whose face had gone the color of cold meat. My attorney's letter arrives tomorrow. We can do this clean, or we can do it in court. Your choice. She walked into the elevator without looking back. As the doors closed, she heard her mother-in-law's voice rise sharp behind her, barren and still putting on airs, and Mitchell's muffled snarl. But none of that belonged to her anymore. Outside the building, the afternoon sun on Capitol Hill was almost too bright. Claire took a long breath. The air tasted like freedom and uncertainty in equal measure. 31 years old, divorcing, carrying the wreckage of a failed marriage and a label that said, cannot reproduce. Modest savings. A job at a publishing house she nearly lost from missing too many days for medical appointments. What came next? She had no idea. But she knew this, from today on, she lived for herself. What she didn't know yet was that the gears of her life had already started turning a new direction the moment she walked out of that building. A future she couldn't have imagined, one that would shatter every diagnosis she'd been handed, was waiting somewhere up ahead. And it would begin a month later, at a blind date she had no hope for and only agreed to because her bank account demanded it. The corner table at Cloud 9 Coffee in downtown Seattle had a view of the Sound. Claire checked her phone for the third time. 22 minutes past the agreed meeting time. Aunt Margaret, the friend of a friend who'd insisted on setting this up, had described the man as a mobility impaired but very decent, won't be picky about your situation. Claire smiled bitterly at her own reflection in the dark window. Of course. A woman whose ex-husband had leveraged her infertility into divorce wasn't exactly a hot prospect. The framing said it all, won't be picky about your situation. Like she was a clearance item with a defect sticker. She was reaching for her bag, ready to call the whole thing off, when a server gently guided a wheelchair around the corner toward her table. My apologies. Traffic on the bridge was worse than I expected. The man's voice was even, with a small note of regret. Claire looked up and felt something catch in her chest. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with a clean, refined face and a stillness about him that didn't match her assumptions. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, with a thin blanket folded over his lap. What struck her most were his eyes. Calm, deep, and, or most surprising of all, not avoidant. They held hers directly, with neither the bitterness nor the hunger she'd half expected. It's fine. I just got here too. She made herself smile and sat back down. Whatever irritation she'd been nursing dissolved the moment she saw the chair. They were both, in some sense, damaged goods. No need to make it harder than it already was. Claire Yates? I'm Daniel Whitfield. He nodded politely and waved the server off, maneuvering his chair into position with practiced ease. Daniel. Nice to meet you. She didn't know what to say next. She and Mitchell had been college sweethearts. She'd never done this kind of transactional dating before. Aunt Margaret probably gave you the broad strokes about my situation. He didn't waste time. His tone was even, almost clinical. 3 years ago, a car accident. Spinal cord injury. Lower body paralysis. Permanent. And, he paused, his gaze meeting hers without flinching, as a result, I'm also unable to father children. Claire's hand tightened around her water glass. The directness was almost brutal. Unable to father children, those words landed somewhere tender she'd thought was scarred over by now. She looked at him, expecting some flicker of self-pity or testing. There was neither. Just a man stating the terms. I'm sure she covered my situation too, Claire said, looking down into her glass. Divorced. The reason being that the wife couldn't conceive. She had to push the last words out. I see. He said it without comment, without pity, without judgment. Then, what are you looking for, Claire? In a partner. In whatever a marriage might look like, given everything. What was she looking for? A bitter taste rose in her throat. After Mitchell's family, she had no romantic expectations left. What was she looking for? The honest answer was not to be despised. But she pulled herself together. This was a meeting that mattered, even if she didn't feel it yet. She needed somewhere to land. Some kind of stability while she rebuilt. Honesty. Respect. She lifted her eyes and met his straight on. Financial independence on both sides. And being treated as an equal. I don't need pity, and I don't need someone who's willing to overlook me. If anything happens between two people, it should be a partnership. Not charity. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, surprise, maybe. Then it settled back into that deep calm. He nodded. That's almost word for word what I'd have said. Marriage isn't charity, and it isn't a leash. I want a partner who treats me as an equal and who I can take care of in turn. My condition makes certain conventional things impossible, including a normal physical relationship and biological children. I want that out in the open from the start. Disappointment later isn't fair to either of us. He spoke like someone walking through a contract, line by line. Strangely, Claire didn't feel insulted. She felt something close to relief. Honesty laid out flat was better than promises that crumbled later. I understand, she said. And children, they're no longer a non-negotiable for me. Half of that was true. Half of it was just the calluses talking. The conversation went easier after that. They spoke about work in vague outlines. Claire said she did editorial work, Daniel said he handled investments and management. They covered a few light topics. Avoided old wounds. Avoided the future. It felt less like a date and more like a friendly job interview. When they parted, he handed her a simple card with only a name and number. Claire, I enjoyed today. If my situation isn't a deal breaker, I'd like to keep meeting, on the understanding that we're moving toward marriage. Take your time deciding. She took the card and nodded. She didn't say yes. But she knew, walking out into the afternoon light, that this was probably the most honest offer she'd had in years. Over the next month, they met a handful of times. Coffee. Dinners at places with proper accessibility. Daniel didn't say much, but when he spoke, it was thoughtful. He remembered she took her tea without sugar and hated cilantro. He never asked about her marriage. She knew almost nothing about his accident or his family beyond surface details, that he came from money, lived alone in a high-rise penthouse with full accessibility, and had a small staff of caretakers and drivers who came and went on a schedule. The distance felt safe. After Mitchell's family, where every part of her had been treated as their property, Daniel's careful boundaries felt like medicine. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings ground toward a close. Once her attorney produced a portion of the evidence and made it clear they were prepared to file for spousal damages on grounds of infidelity, Mitchell folded. Claire walked away with a settlement that wasn't huge but covered her legal fees and gave her room to breathe. The day she signed the divorce papers, she sat by Aoki Beach for the entire afternoon. The water did its slow work. There was no triumph. Just exhaustion and a hollow space where 5 years of her life used to live. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel, things wrapped up okay? Dinner tonight? I think there's a place you'd like. She looked at the screen for a long time before replying with a single word, okay. Dinner was at a quiet, semi-private restaurant in the Pike Place area. Daniel didn't push small talk. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork and asked, so? What's the plan from here? Claire was quiet for a moment, then put her own fork down. She'd been turning this over for days. Daniel. About what you proposed. I've thought about it. He looked up and waited. If you still want a partner, I'm willing to do this. We'll write up an agreement that lays out both sides. I need a stable environment. I need a marriage on paper, in part to keep certain people and pressures off my back. In exchange, I'll handle the household when your caregivers aren't on shift. I'll be Mrs. Whitfield publicly and privately, however the role calls for it. She got it out in one breath. Her heart was pounding. She was gambling, on a man who seemed decent but was still mostly a stranger, and on the bet that this kind of arrangement wouldn't pull her into a different version of the same trap. Daniel watched her for a long moment. His eyes were unreadable. Just when she started to feel uncertain, he spoke. We can sign an agreement. I'd add a few terms. 1. We stay faithful for the duration of the marriage. We protect each other's reputation. 2. My financial holdings are complicated. We'll handle a prenup. During the marriage, all household expenses are mine. You'll receive a monthly household allowance. Your own income stays yours. 3. His gaze sharpened just a touch. In public, you're Mrs. Whitfield, and you'll have the standing that comes with it. In private, we live as equals. You keep your job, your career, your independence. I won't interfere unless you ask. I won't ask about your past unless you offer. 4. If either of us meets someone they want to be with, we end this cleanly. No drama. No bitterness. Can you live with all of that? The terms were clear. They were fair. They even gave her an exit. Compared to Mitchell's vague promises that had grown stranger and stranger over time, this contract felt almost generous. Claire let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Yes. I can. Then. Daniel raised his teacup, since neither of them had ordered alcohol, and tilted it slightly toward her. Here's to a productive partnership, Mrs. Yates. Or, an early toast to a marriage that, at minimum, treats each other with respect. To a productive partnership, Mr. Whitfield. There was no wedding. No ceremony. No announcements. A few days later, Claire moved into the top floor unit of a glass tower overlooking the city. The penthouse was vast, almost too vast, a study in pale grays and whites, expensive in a way that felt cold rather than comfortable. The single concession that warmed her toward it was that every space had been designed for accessibility. She was given the guest suite. Daniel kept the master, on the other side of a generous shared living room. They went to the courthouse on a quiet Wednesday morning. Outside, his driver pulled up. Before they got in, Daniel handed her a small velvet box. A wedding gift. Part of the agreement. Inside was an elegant, understated diamond ring. Beside it, a set of car keys and a credit card under his name. The ring is necessary stagecraft. The car is in the garage. The card is for household and personal expenses, the limit should cover anything you need. He spoke as if he were reading bullet points. My work involves certain functions. When you'll need to attend, my assistant will give you advance notice. Otherwise, your time is your own. If you'd rather not work, that's fine too. Thank you. Claire closed the box without making a show of refusing. It was, as he said, part of the role she'd agreed to play. She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Days drifted by in a quiet rhythm. Daniel was busy. He spent half his hours in the home office, on video calls or working through documents. His care team rotated through, handling his physical therapy and medical needs, so Claire rarely needed to lift a finger for him. She helped with small things, handing him something, occasionally repositioning his chair when the electric controls were inconvenient. They didn't talk much. But there was an odd ease to it. Claire took a new editorial job at a publishing house downtown, 9 to 5. Sometimes she came home and they ate together at the dining table, with meals their cook had prepped. Sometimes they didn't cross paths. They might exchange a few words about something in the news, or a book they both read. The atmosphere was never warm. But it wasn't cold either. For Claire, after what she'd come from, it felt like reprieve. No one was pressuring her to produce a child. No one was watching her face for signs of failure. No one was speaking past her like she was furniture. She started reclaiming small parts of herself. Picked up a flower arranging class on Wednesday evenings. Read books for pleasure for the first time in years. And then one afternoon, she came home early and ran into someone she had hoped never to see again. Standing in the lobby of the residential tower, dressed in a too tight blouse and too much perfume, was Mitchell's mother. The older woman's face hadn't changed. Same sharp eyes. Same look of appraisal, like she was inspecting livestock. Well. If it isn't Claire. Heads turned. A few residents glanced over and then politely glanced away. Quick work, sweetheart. What's it been, a few months? And here you are, in a place like this. You've certainly got a talent. Claire's stomach turned. She did not want this conversation in her own building. Did you need something? Can't a woman drop in and check on her former daughter-in-law? Mitchell's mother stepped closer, eyes sweeping over Claire's outfit, a simple work dress, but well cut, and the leather tote on her shoulder. Her expression curdled into something jealous and contemptuous at once. I heard you ended up with a man in a wheelchair. Now I see why you signed those divorce papers so fast. You'd already lined up someone with money. A rich cripple, no less. Couldn't have kids, found another one who can't either. Neither of you has anything to complain about, is that the math? The words landed like ice picks. Claire's face went pale. Her fingers cut into her palms. Watch your mouth, Mrs. Sutton. Your son and I aren't anything to each other anymore. My marriage is none of your business. None of my business? I'm your mother-in-law. Former. And if you hadn't lied about not being able to have children, my Mitchell would have had a son by now. And here you are, walking out with your head held high, living in this tower, while my boy. Your son cheated on me. Got someone pregnant during our marriage. There's documented proof. Would you like me to call my attorney and walk you through the discovery file? Or shall I let the residents of this lobby weigh in? Mitchell's mother choked, recalibrated, and dropped her voice low, but still loud enough for the woman pretending to read her phone 6 feet away. Claire, listen, I'm telling you this for your own good. What did you marry that man for? Money? How long is that going to last? When his health goes, his family will toss you out, and then where are you, old, infertile, no one looking your way? Take some advice. Find an honest man. Even a poorer one. Someone who can give you a real family. That's what a real future looks like. A new voice cut in from across the lobby. Quiet. Even. Edged with cold. Excuse me. Are you telling my wife what a real future looks like? Both women turned. Daniel was rolling toward them from the private elevator, his driver pushing the chair. He was in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, and his face was perfectly still, but the temperature in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mitchell's mother straightened, taking in the chair, and her chin came up with a tinge of contempt. And you must be Mr. Whitfield. I'm doing your wife a kindness. She can't have children. Marriage is serious. Your family must want. Don't trouble yourself. Daniel stopped his chair next to Claire and, very naturally, extended his hand. After a half-second's hesitation, she put hers in his palm. His grip was cool, firm, steady. Whatever kind of person my wife is, I'm the one qualified to assess that, not you. His voice carried just far enough for the entire lobby to hear. Whether we have children, when we have them, how we have them, that is our business. Not yours. Especially not the business of someone who has already harmed her, and that of her family. He let the words my wife and not yours sit in the air. Furthermore, he continued, you have just made statements that meet the threshold for defamation and harassment in this state. My attorney will be in touch. If you don't leave my building of your own accord in the next 60 seconds, I'll have the concierge escort you out, and I'll consider whether to involve the police. Mitchell's mother went red, then white, then a blotchy patchwork of both. She'd come hoping to humiliate Claire and pry for gossip. She had not anticipated the man in the wheelchair, and certainly not the unblinking, surgical chill of him. She looked at Daniel's expressionless eyes, then at the security guard now walking briskly across the lobby. Whatever she had planned to throw next, she swallowed. She turned on her heel, threw a final "you'll see" over her shoulder, and was gone. The bystanders dispersed. Daniel released Claire's hand the way one closes a file folder, the gesture finished. He glanced up at her. All right? She shook her head, then nodded. Her throat had locked up. Thank you. It wasn't just for the rescue. It was for the word wife, said without hesitation, in front of strangers, in her defense. Let's go up. He gestured to his driver. In the elevator, neither of them spoke. When the doors opened on the top floor, he said only, next time someone like that shows up, don't waste your breath. Call security. Or call me. Okay, Claire said quietly. Inside the cool, vast apartment, she leaned back against the closed door and let her body shake. Mitchell's mother's words still hung in her ears. Can't lay an egg. Cripple. Money grabber. After he's gone, you'll be alone. This, from the outside, looking in, was what she and Daniel were. A childless woman, a paralyzed man. People making the best of damaged lives. A cruel little arithmetic. Could she actually find a real life inside this contract? Or had she just traded one cage for another, this one with a better view? Daniel was good to her. Considerate. Spacious. Respectful. But that careful distance was also a wall. They were polite to each other. That was the entire vocabulary. Late that night she lay awake thinking about the way his hand had felt around hers in the lobby. About the steadiness of my wife. The warmth of it had been real, even if everything around it was performance. Where exactly were the edges of this arrangement? And where in any of it was she supposed to put her future? She fell asleep eventually, into a tangle of dreams, Mitchell's accusing face, his mother's mouth, Daniel's cool eyes turning away, and somewhere underneath it, a doctor saying flatly, you will never carry a child. A week passed before the lobby incident faded from Claire's nerves. Daniel didn't bring it up. He'd simply, without making a thing of it, instructed the building staff to log her name on a private clearance list. Anyone showing up to see her would now be screened before reaching the elevators. She found out only because the front desk mentioned it in passing. That was Daniel. He fixed things quietly, then moved on. It was a Thursday morning, and Claire was halfway through her coffee when he rolled out of his study and stopped at the edge of the kitchen. Saturday evening. There's a function I need to attend. The Wexler Foundation Gala at the Fairmont. I'd like you to come. Claire looked up. In the 2 months they'd been married, this was the first time he'd asked her to appear with him publicly. Of course. Black tie? Yes. Long gown. Something simple but formal. He paused. My assistant will send over a stylist this afternoon if that's all right. That's fine. He nodded and started to turn, then stopped. Claire. There will be people there who knew me before the accident. And people who know me only after. Some of them will be curious about you. About us. You don't have to perform anything. Just be yourself. I'll handle the rest. She set down her cup. Anything I should avoid mentioning? My family won't be there. The foundation is run by a board, my involvement is financial. You won't be cross-examined. Then, dryly, by anyone who matters. It was the closest thing to humor she'd heard from him. The stylist arrived that afternoon with 3 options. Claire picked the simplest, a deep navy silk gown with clean lines and a high neck, nothing that screamed money but nothing that apologized either. The diamond from her ring was the only stone on her body. When she came out of her room on Saturday evening, Daniel was already in the foyer waiting, in a black tuxedo, his hair freshly cut. He looked her over once, evenly. Good, he said. That was all. But the way his eyes lingered for half a second longer than necessary told her something else. The Fairmont's grand ballroom was the kind of room that swallowed sound and replaced it with a soft, expensive hush. Crystal. Champagne towers. A string quartet in the corner playing something tasteful and forgettable. The crowd was old Seattle money mixed with new tech wealth, gray-haired board members in dinner jackets, 30-somethings in custom suits, women in jewelry that had probably been appraised that morning. Claire walked beside Daniel's chair with her hand resting lightly on the armrest. Heads turned. Conversations adjusted. She felt the attention without flinching, she had practiced this in her head all week. Daniel. Good to see you out of that office. A barrel-chested man in his 60s came over, gripped Daniel's hand, and then turned a curious gaze on Claire. And this must be the woman we've all been hearing rumors about. I'm Walter Reese, Daniel's godfather. You'll have to forgive how late I am to this party, I only heard last week. Claire Yates. It's a pleasure. Yates. He smiled warmly, with no edge. Daniel, you've done well. Eyes that don't flinch. That's what you want. The compliment landed somewhere unexpected in her chest. Daniel only smiled faintly and steered them onward. The next hour was a slow procession. Daniel introduced her to perhaps a dozen people. Each interaction was brief and warm. None of them were the inquisitors she braced herself for. A few cast glances at his chair, then at her, but the glances were curious rather than cruel. Claire began to relax. She was at the bar getting a glass of sparkling water when she felt someone slide in next to her. You must be the new Mrs. Whitfield. I've been wondering when I'd finally see you in person. The voice was honeyed. Claire turned. The woman was striking, late 20s, glossy dark hair, an emerald gown cut to display considerable assets and a body that had clearly never carried anything heavier than a designer bag. Her smile was the kind that women learn to recognize early. I'm Sloane Marchetti. Daniel and I go way back. Claire. Pleasure. Oh, the pleasure's mine. Sloane leaned against the bar, swirling a glass of red wine. I have to say, I was surprised when I heard Daniel had married. After the accident, he was so adamant about staying single. He always said it wouldn't be fair to anyone. She paused, watching Claire's face for a reaction. Claire kept her expression mild and waited. But I suppose, Sloane went on, lighter now, given the circumstances, your circumstances, I mean, it actually works out beautifully, doesn't it? You don't need the things he can't provide, and he doesn't need to feel guilty. It's quite elegant, really. Everyone gets what they need. There it was. Wrapped in silk, but a knife. Claire took a small sip of her water. She did not let her hand tremble. I'm sorry, Sloane, was there a question in there? Or were you just thinking out loud? Sloane laughed, a delicate, brittle sound. Oh, don't take it the wrong way. I just mean, it must be nice to find someone who matches your situation. Claire set her glass down. Tell me, Sloane, how do you and Daniel know each other again? You said you go way back. Oh, our families are old friends. We grew up together. There was a time, she let the pause do the work, when everyone assumed we'd end up married. Before the accident, of course. Of course. Claire smiled politely. Which would explain why you're here alone, 8 years after the accident, telling his wife about it at the bar. The pleasant fixed smile on Sloane's face slipped half an inch. What I mean is, Claire continued, very gently, that whatever you and Daniel were before, we are who we are now. And what works in our marriage isn't really anything I'd expect a guest at a gala to have insight into. But thank you for the warm welcome. She lifted her glass in a small mock toast and walked away before Sloane could find her footing. She made it to the edge of the dance floor before she felt her hands start to shake. Not from fear. From the held-back rage of months. Given your circumstances. As if her body were a public document. As if every stranger had earned a copy. Claire. Daniel had rolled up beside her without her noticing. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were on her, careful. You all right? Fine, she said. Then, more honestly, Sloane Marchetti just introduced herself to me at the bar. I don't think we'll be friends. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not surprise. Recognition. Then, lower, what did she say? She suggested our marriage was elegant because we both come pre-broken. His jaw tightened. He looked toward the bar, where Sloane was now in animated conversation with a tall man who was clearly not listening to her. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. Old friend? Old something. His voice went flat. Family connection. Before the accident she made it clear she expected an arrangement. After the accident she made it clear she didn't. I haven't spoken to her in years. I didn't know she was on tonight's list. You don't owe me an explanation. I do, actually. He looked up at her. I told you I wouldn't ask about your past. The same goes the other way, but if someone from mine is walking up to you and saying things like that, I owe you the context. She's not a threat to anything. She's a person who is unhappy with her own life and likes to pull other people into it. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Okay. Dance with me, he said. She blinked. Not a real dance, obviously. A faint, dry smile. But come stand with me on the floor. The chair has its uses. People assume it's intimate. It's better than letting Sloane think she got under your skin. So she let him guide his chair to the edge of the dance floor, and she stood close, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder, the other in his palm. The string quartet was playing something slow. Daniel didn't speak. Around them, couples turned in slow arcs. Eyes drifted toward them, the chair, the woman, the way he held her hand without performance. After a minute, very quietly, he said, thank you for not walking out. For not walking out tonight? For not walking out at all, he said. 2 months in. A lesser woman would have run by now. She looked down at him. The gala lights caught the edge of his profile, the clean line of his jaw, the small tiredness around his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. I'm not running, Daniel. He held her gaze for a long second. Then nodded, once, and looked away. They left the gala just after 11. In the back of the car, neither of them said much. Claire watched the city slide by through the window. Daniel was on his phone, dealing with something, his face lit by the screen. When they got home, he stopped his chair in the foyer instead of heading toward his side of the apartment. Claire. What Sloane said. About the math of our marriage. He didn't look at her directly. I want to be clear about something. I didn't marry you because I thought you were a match to me, in the way she meant. I married you because the woman I met in that cafe answered every question I asked her like she'd already thought about it for a year. Claire's throat closed for a moment. That's a strange compliment, she finally said. It is, he agreed. I've been told I'm not warm. I'm working on it. He rolled past her toward his suite, and the door closed quietly behind him. Claire stood in the foyer for a long time, her heels in her hand. Part 4, The Test. 3 weeks later, Claire started feeling off. It began with a low, persistent fatigue. Not the kind that came from a long week at work, the kind that started the moment she opened her eyes in the morning and persisted through her second coffee. She chalked it up to the change of seasons. Then to a possible iron deficiency. Then to the lingering stress of the divorce that maybe, finally, was catching up to her body. Then came the nausea. Mild and manageable, but consistent, particularly in the mornings, particularly around the smell of the cook's coffee. Then her chest started to ache. A deep tenderness that made even the seam of her bra uncomfortable. She noticed she'd skipped a period, but Claire's cycle had been chaotic for years thanks to the rounds of fertility hormones she'd cycled through during her marriage to Mitchell. A skipped period meant nothing. It had meant nothing dozens of times. But a month became 6 weeks. 6 weeks became 7. And one morning, standing in the kitchen, the smell of fresh strawberries from the fruit bowl turned her stomach so hard she had to leave the room. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, and finally let the thought surface. No. Impossible. She and Daniel had never had any kind of physical relationship. The contract was explicit. He couldn't father a child. And she had been told, by 3 separate fertility specialists, that her tubes were severely blocked on both sides. She had not been with anyone else. The math didn't add up to anything. The math didn't add up to the possibility of anything. And yet. That afternoon, on her lunch break, she walked 3 blocks from her office to a drugstore she'd never been to before. She bought 2 tests, 2 different brands, paid in cash, and went back to the office. She used the small accessible bathroom on a different floor from her own, because she didn't want to risk a coworker hearing her, and she stood with her back against the door and waited. Both tests went positive within 90 seconds. 2 pink lines. Then, on the digital one, pregnant of 5+ weeks. Claire stared at the sticks in her hand and felt the floor of her life tilt. It wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. Her first thought, irrationally, was Mitchell will say I cheated on him. Her second thought, equally irrational, was Daniel will think I cheated on him. Her third thought, finally lucid, was I need to see a doctor. A real one. Today. She didn't go back to her desk. She emailed her manager that something had come up and she'd be out the rest of the day. She walked to the curb, hailed a cab, and gave the driver the address of a clinic across town that she knew from years of fertility appointments. Not the one she had been to most recently. Somewhere new. Somewhere that didn't have her old chart on file. In the waiting room, she sat with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers went white. She kept thinking, there's been a mistake. The tests are wrong. It's a hormonal echo from the old treatments. It's a cyst. It's anything except what it looks like. When the technician finally called her name and led her to the ultrasound room, Claire had rehearsed an explanation for the inevitable disappointment. I know it's probably not real. I just need to be sure. The technician was young, perhaps mid-20s, with kind eyes. She asked Claire her history. Claire gave it in clipped, factual sentences. Severe bilateral tubal occlusion, diagnosed 3 times. 2 failed IVF cycles. Current marriage is non-consummated for medical reasons. No possibility of conception. 2 over-the-counter tests came back positive this afternoon. I expect this is a false alarm, but I want it confirmed. The young woman's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she nodded and prepped the machine. The cool gel went on. The probe glided. The screen flickered. The technician's face changed. She stopped speaking. She moved the probe slowly back and forth across Claire's lower abdomen, very methodically, her brow furrowing deeper with each pass. She zoomed in. Zoomed out. Took a measurement. Took another. Glanced at Claire, then away. Mrs. Yates, please try to keep your breathing steady. This. She kept checking the equipment settings, then glancing nervously at the closed door of the exam room, as if confirming they were alone. Dr. Walsh, could you come take a look at this? Right now. Claire's pulse went into her ears. Something's wrong. Something's terribly wrong. It's not viable. It's an ectopic. It's something cancerous. Within moments, a silver-haired physician strode in and took the probe from the technician's hands. He stared at the screen for a long stretch, his finger tracing back and forth over several pulsing points of light. His breathing visibly quickened. That's not possible, he murmured, then turned sharply to face Claire on the exam table, his eyes wide with disbelief. Mrs. Yates, you said you'd been diagnosed at multiple clinics, severe bilateral fallopian tube blockage. No chance of natural conception? Claire's stomach dropped. Her nails dug into her palms. Not this question again. For 4 months now, that diagnosis had been the recurring nightmare she couldn't wake from. But today, the doctor's expression was different from any she'd seen before. That's right, she managed, her voice dry as paper. 3 different fertility centers, including the Regional Reproductive Institute. So what are you telling me? Dr. Walsh drew a long breath and pointed at the screen. His hand was trembling. 30 years in medicine, and he'd never seen anything like this. Mrs. Yates, I need you to stay calm when I tell you this. He paused, weighing each word as if it were made of lead. You're not just pregnant. You're carrying 4. Claire blinked at him. I'm sorry. What? He turned the screen toward her and pointed. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 separate gestational sacs. 4 separate heartbeats. Approximately 6 weeks, give or take a few days. Spontaneous quadruplets, in a woman who, on paper, should not have been able to conceive at all. The room tilted. That's not possible, Claire whispered. The same words he had used moments before. My tubes. I am looking at the imaging right now, Mrs. Yates. Dr. Walsh's voice softened, but the astonishment was still in it. I will want you to get a full reassessment of your tubal status, and I will want to compare against your old films. It's possible the original diagnoses were wrong. It's possible there was a partial recanalization. It's also possible we're looking at one of the most unusual pregnancies I've seen in my career. But the imaging is the imaging. 4 sacs. 4 heartbeats. 4, Claire repeated. The word didn't fit in her mouth. I need to ask you a few questions, and I want you to take your time answering. Dr. Walsh pulled up a stool. When was your last menstrual period? About 7 weeks ago. Maybe 8. My cycle has been irregular for years from hormone treatments. And the date of conception, if you can estimate? Claire's mind went blank. She had been with no one since her divorce. The contract with Daniel was explicit and respected. They had never. She thought back. She thought back hard. 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago was the night of the gala. She had come home from the gala, taken off her heels, sat in the foyer, and gone to bed. Alone. In the guest suite. As always. There was no answer. I don't know, she said quietly. I genuinely don't know. Dr. Walsh studied her face for a long moment, then nodded, professional and kind. Mrs. Yates. I'm going to give you a referral to a high-risk maternal fetal specialist. A spontaneous quadruplet pregnancy, particularly in a patient with your history, is going to need immediate, expert care. There are decisions ahead, medical and personal, that you do not need to make in this room today. What I need you to do today is breathe, drink water, eat something gentle, and not drive yourself anywhere if you can avoid it. Is there someone who can pick you up? Claire stared at the ceiling tiles. Is there someone? There was a husband. A husband who had signed a contract that explicitly said no children. A husband who, by every medical fact available, could not be the father of these 4 heartbeats. A husband who had been kind to her, in his careful, distant way, and who had looked at her on a dance floor and said, I'm not warm. I'm working on it. A husband who was going to look at this ultrasound and have to decide whether to believe her. I'll get a cab, Claire said. Dr. Walsh nodded slowly. I'll print everything for you. The films, the report. Take it home. Take your time. And please, make that follow-up appointment. Within the week. Claire sat in the back of the cab home with the manila envelope on her lap and her hand pressed flat against her stomach. The city slid past the windows, gray and ordinary, as if nothing had happened. Inside her, 4 hearts were beating. 4 impossible hearts. She didn't cry. She couldn't yet. The shock was too clean, too total. Underneath it, in some place she had not visited in 5 years, something else was unfolding very slowly, like a fist opening for the first time in a long time. She had been told she could not. By specialists. By her ex-husband. By her ex-mother-in-law. By her own body, month after month, year after year. The word Barren had been carved into her like a brand. And her body had answered with 4. She pressed her hand harder against her stomach and let out a small, shaking breath that was almost a laugh. Then the next thought arrived, cold and clear. How am I going to explain this to Daniel? The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like the longest of Claire's life. She stood in the mirrored car with the manila envelope clutched against her chest and watched her reflection multiply in the polished walls. Pale face. Eyes too wide. A woman who had walked into a clinic expecting to be told she had a hormonal echo, and was walking out carrying 4 lives. She didn't have a story. She had no explanation. She had only the truth, which was that the truth made no sense. The doors opened onto the foyer. Daniel was already home. She could hear the low murmur of a video call from his study, his voice, even and clipped, working through some matter of business. The cook had left dinner under a warming cover on the dining counter. Everything in the apartment was as it always was. Quiet. Spacious. Cold. Claire walked to her room without making a sound, set the envelope on her desk, and sat on the edge of the bed. For an hour, she did nothing. She listened to her own breathing. She listened to Daniel's voice carrying faintly through 2 doors. She watched the light in the room shift from gold to amber to gray. She thought about leaving. She thought about packing a bag, withdrawing what she could from her own account, and disappearing somewhere small and quiet for 9 months. She had savings. She had a settlement. She could find a town. She could let Daniel come home one evening to an empty guest suite and a short note. Thank you for your kindness. Our agreement is dissolved. Don't look for me. He would honor it. Of all the things she knew about him, she knew that. It would be cleaner. It would protect him from the impossible position she was about to put him in. It would protect her from having to watch his face when she told him. She got as far as pulling her suitcase from the closet. Then she stopped, with her hand on the zipper, and closed her eyes. No. She had already lived one life of running. Of folding herself smaller to fit into someone else's expectations. Of letting a man's mother decide whether she was worth speaking to. Of swallowing the word Barren every morning with her coffee and pretending it didn't taste like rust. These 4 heartbeats were not a problem to be hidden. They were not a debt she owed to Daniel's silence. They were hers. And whatever Daniel was, say, careful, distant, contractual, he was also the man who had said my wife in a lobby full of strangers, and had not let go of her hand until she was steady. He deserved the truth. Even the impossible version. She pushed the suitcase back into the closet. She washed her face. She picked up the envelope and walked to his study door. She knocked. Come in. Daniel was at his desk, the laptop closed now, a glass of water at his elbow. He looked up, and whatever expression he had been wearing reset itself when he saw her face. Claire. What's wrong? I need to talk to you. Her voice caught. She steadied it. It's serious. Can you give me a few minutes? He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down. She didn't sit. She set the envelope on the desk between them. Before you open that, I want to say 2 things. Her hands were shaking. She tucked them behind her back, then realized that looked worse, and let them rest at her sides. First. I have not broken our agreement. I have not been with anyone else. Since the day I signed those papers, there has been no one. I want that on the record before you look at what's in there, because what you're about to see will make you doubt me, and I will not blame you for it. But I am telling you the truth. His face went very still. Second. Her voice cracked, and she pressed it back into shape. I do not have an explanation. I have only what the doctor told me today. I'm asking you to read it before you decide what you think. She stepped back from the desk. Daniel watched her for a long second. Then he reached for the envelope, opened it, and slid out the contents. The ultrasound printouts. The clinical report. The referral to maternal fetal medicine. She watched him read. She watched his eyes move down the page, then stop, then go back up to the top, then move down again. She watched him pick up the ultrasound printouts and study them one by one. She watched him set them down very carefully, perfectly aligned, on the desk. The silence in the room thickened until it felt like glass. When he finally looked up at her, his face was unreadable. 6 weeks, he said. Approximately. 4. Yes. And you're certain he paused. The word faithful hung in the air without being said. He chose another. You're certain you've been alone? I'm certain. Then how? Daniel, I don't know. For a long moment he didn't move. He looked at the printouts again. Then back at her. His eyes were doing something she had never seen before, a kind of rapid, internal recalculation, like a man watching an equation he had solved years ago suddenly reorder itself. Sit down, he said quietly. She sat. He rolled his chair out from behind the desk and around so that nothing was between them. He stopped close enough that she could see the small muscle working at his jaw. Claire. I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. She nodded. He took a breath. After the accident, I was told that the spinal injury made fathering a child extremely unlikely. Extremely unlikely is the language they used. Not impossible. The damage to the cord was at a level where some men retain partial function, particularly with assistance. I was not one of them, in the way most people would mean. But the reproductive specialists told me at the time that biological paternity was not categorically off the table. There were procedures. Retrievals. Things that could be done in a clinical setting, if I ever decided to pursue it. Claire's hand went to her mouth. I never pursued it, he continued, very evenly. I had no reason to. I had decided I would not be a father. I had decided I would not marry. After Sloane and the rest of that generation made it clear what they thought of me in a chair, I had decided a great many things. None of them included children. Daniel. Let me finish. His voice didn't rise, but it took on weight. When I told you, at the cafe, that I was unable to father children, I was telling you what I believed to be functionally true. I had no expectation of fathering anyone, and I assumed the same as you assumed. I did not lie to you. But I owe you the precision now. Extremely unlikely is not impossible. I know the difference. I should have used the more accurate words. Claire felt the room tilt for the second time that day. But Daniel, we have never. I know. His eyes did not leave hers. Which is why what you're showing me does not make sense to me either. Whatever the medical explanation is, it is not the obvious one. We have not been together. There has been no opportunity. So I am telling you what I told you about my body, and I am hearing what you are telling me about yours, and we are sitting here with 4 heartbeats on this desk and no theory that fits. Silence. Then, quietly, do you believe me? He didn't answer right away. He looked at her. Really looked at her. At her pale face, her hands curled in her lap, the thin tremor that ran through her shoulders. He looked at the woman who, 2 months ago, had sat across from him at a restaurant and laid out her conditions like a person who had already lost too much to lose more. Yes, he said. I believe you. Something inside Claire's chest collapsed and reopened in the same breath. She put her face in her hands and, finally, cried. He did not move to touch her. He did not say don't cry. He sat with her while she cried, his presence steady, the way he had been steady in the lobby, and on the dance floor, and at every careful distance he had kept since the day she signed her name on a contract. When she could speak again, she lifted her head. I don't know what to do. You don't have to know yet. Daniel, 4. High risk doesn't begin to cover it. The doctor talked about decisions. Some of those decisions are about, she couldn't say it. Selective reduction. Yes. That's your decision, he said immediately. Not mine. Not the doctor's. Not anyone's. Yours. I know that. I know that legally and medically it's mine. But, Daniel, what is this? What are we? What are we to each other in this? Her voice broke again. I signed a contract that said no children. You signed a contract that said no children. I walked into your home as an arrangement, and now I am sitting here telling you I am 6 weeks pregnant with 4 impossible babies, and I don't know what you want me to do with that. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Claire. May I take your hand? She blinked. Yes. He reached across the small space between them and took her hand. His palm was cool and steady, the way it had been in the lobby. He did not squeeze hard. He just held it. I don't know what we are either, he said. I have known you for 4 months and I have been married to you for 2 of them, and I have spent most of that time being careful with you because I thought careful was the kindest thing I had to offer. I am not in the habit of being warm. I told you that the night of the gala. I am working on it, and I am slow. She nodded, mute. What I am going to tell you now is not contractual. It is not part of any agreement we signed, and it is not a condition of anything that happens next. It is a fact about me, and I want you to have it, and you can do with it what you want. She waited. I did not marry you because we were both broken in ways that fit, he said. That was Sloane's theory. It was not mine. I married you because you walked into that cafe and you told me, in plain language, what you needed and what you would not tolerate. Nobody had spoken to me that way since the accident. Most people speak around me, or above me, or down to me, or in tones reserved for the dying. You spoke to me. As if I were a person you were considering doing business with whom you might also build a life. I had not realized how badly I needed to be spoken to that way until it happened. Claire's eyes filled again. So whatever this is, he continued, whatever medical riddle is sitting on this desk, I am going to tell you what I will do, regardless of what you decide. I will pay for every piece of medical care these heartbeats and your body need, whether they remain 4 or fewer, or none. I will not ask you to leave this home. I will not invoke the exit clause. I will not let any member of my family or yours, or any Sloane Marchetti from any gala, speak to you the way you have been spoken to before. If you carry these children to term, they will have my name if you want them to, and they will have everything I have, and no one will ever ask them what they are or aren't, because they will be mine in every way that I get to define. He paused. And if you decide that you cannot do this, that 4 is too many, that any number is too many, that the entire situation is too much, I will support that decision with the same resources and the same silence. You do not owe me a pregnancy. You do not owe me an explanation better than the one you have. You do not owe me anything. He let out a slow breath. That is what I am offering you. It is not contingent on you loving me. It is not contingent on us becoming something we are not. It is contingent on nothing. Claire could not speak. She looked at his hand around hers, at the long careful fingers, the wedding band that matched hers, the steady pulse at his wrist, and she thought about the man at the cafe who had laid out his terms like an honest accountant, and the man in the lobby who had said my wife, and the man on the dance floor who had said I am working on it, and she understood, with a clarity that felt almost like grief, that she had married a person and not noticed. Daniel. I think I want to keep them. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something in his face had eased. Okay. All 4. Okay. I don't know if my body can do it. I don't know if any of this is survivable. Medically. I have to talk to the specialist. I have to understand what I'm asking my body to carry. Yes. And I don't know what we are. We don't have to know that today either. She let out a small, broken laugh. You keep saying that. It keeps being true. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. For a long moment they sat that way, in a study lit only by the desk lamp, with 4 impossible heartbeats on the desk between them. Then Daniel said, very quietly, Claire. Yes. I want to be there. For the appointments. The specialist. Whatever you need. Not because the contract requires it. Because I am asking. She looked at him. Yes, she said. Please. Part 6, The Specialist. The maternal-fetal medicine specialist's office was on the 7th floor of a glass building near the medical district. Dr. Adiz Okonkwo was a tall, calm woman in her 50s with steady hands and the kind of gaze that had clearly seen a great many impossible things and was not going to be rattled by one more. She had reviewed the films before they arrived. When Claire and Daniel were shown into her office, Daniel in his chair, Claire walking beside him, both of them wearing the same look of careful composure, Dr. Okonkwo gestured for them to settle, and then she came around the desk and sat on the same side as them, in a chair she had clearly placed there on purpose. I want to begin, she said, by saying that I have read your history, Mrs. Yates. The previous tubal diagnoses, the IVF cycles, the medications. I would like, with your permission, to order a full updated workup before I make any claims about how you arrived here. The imaging from your previous clinics is consistent with severe bilateral occlusion. The imaging from this week is consistent with 4 viable intrauterine gestational sacs. Both can be true. Bodies are not always consistent with their charts. We will figure out which version of your anatomy is currently operating, and we will plan from there. Claire nodded. For today, Dr. Okonkwo continued, I want to talk to you about what a quadruplet pregnancy actually is. I want to do this without softening anything, because the worst thing I can do for a patient in your position is allow her to make decisions on incomplete information. Are you prepared for that conversation? Yes. Mr. Whitfield. Yes, Daniel said. Dr. Okonkwo opened a folder. A spontaneous quadruplet pregnancy is rare. Roughly 1 in 700,000 pregnancies. Almost all naturally occurring quadruplets in the modern medical record have come from women who underwent some form of fertility treatment, even years prior. Mrs. Yates, the residual hormonal effects of your previous IVF cycles, combined with whatever has changed in your tubal anatomy, may turn out to explain a great deal. We will know more soon. She looked at Claire directly. What I need you to understand is this. A quadruplet pregnancy is among the highest risk pregnancies a human body can carry. Not a high-risk pregnancy. Among the highest. The risks to you include severe preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, hemorrhage, preterm labor, almost certainly preterm labor. The question is only how preterm, and in rare cases, conditions that require emergency intervention to save your life. The risks to the babies include all the standard prematurity complications, and at 4, the likelihood of at least one child requiring extensive neonatal intensive care is very high. I do not say any of this to frighten you. I say it because you cannot consent to a path you have not been shown. I understand. Selective reduction is a tool we discuss in pregnancies like this one. Not as a value judgment. As a clinical option. Reducing from 4 to 2, in many cases, dramatically improves outcomes for the remaining babies and for the mother. Some patients choose it. Some patients do not. I do not have a preference for my patients. I have a preference for my patients having full information. Claire nodded slowly. Will you tell me, she said, what reducing to 2 would actually change? Numerically. Dr. Okonkwo did. She walked through the numbers. She walked through preterm delivery probabilities at 4 versus 2, NICU duration averages, maternal complication rates, the statistical likelihood of various outcomes at every gestational milestone. She did it without flinching and without persuading. She gave Claire the math. When she was finished, Claire was quiet for a long time. Then she said, and if I carry all 4? What does my year look like? Dr. Okonkwo gave her that, too. Bed rest, almost certainly, beginning somewhere in the 2nd trimester. Frequent monitoring. Likely hospitalization in the 3rd trimester. Cesarean delivery, almost certainly, somewhere between 28 and 32 weeks. A long NICU stay for whichever of the 4 needed it. A recovery period for Claire that would not be quick. Claire listened to all of it. She felt Daniel's hand find hers on the armrest of her chair. He did not squeeze. He just rested his hand over hers, warm and steady. When Dr. Okonkwo finished, Claire took a breath. I'd like to do the workup, she said. I'd like to know what my body is actually doing before I make any decision. But I want to tell you now, so you know where I'm starting from. I don't want to reduce. Not unless something in the workup tells us that carrying 4 will kill me or kill them. I have spent 5 years being told my body could not do this. It is doing this. I would like to give it the chance. Dr. Okonkwo nodded slowly. There was no judgment in her face, but there was something quieter, respect, perhaps. That is a reasonable starting position. We will revisit it at every appointment. Pregnancies change. Bodies change. You are allowed to change your mind in either direction at any point, and I will support whatever decision the data and your body lead you to. Is that acceptable? Yes. Mr. Whitfield. Do you have questions for me? Daniel had been silent through most of it. Now he looked up. 2, he said. First. What is the single most useful thing I can do, as her partner, to give her body the best possible chance at carrying this pregnancy as far as it can safely go? Dr. Okonkwo's expression softened the smallest amount. Make her life quiet, she said. Reduce her stress in every way you have available. Make sure she rests when her body asks her to rest. Make sure she eats. Make sure she does not feel that she has to perform wellness for anyone, including you. Get her to every appointment. Listen to her when she tells you something feels wrong. Patients with strong support systems carry these pregnancies further than patients without them. Statistically and meaningfully. Understood. Second question. Whatever care she requires, home nursing, monitoring equipment, hospitalization, anything that is available at any tier of medicine in this country, I want her to have access to it. What is the process for setting that up? My office can coordinate. I'll have my care manager contact you this week. Thank you. Dr. Okonkwo studied him for a moment, and then Claire, and then both of them together. Whatever she saw, she did not comment on it. She closed her folder. Mrs. Yates. Walk with me to the lab. We'll start the workup today. In the car on the way home, Claire leaned her head against the window and watched the city slide by. She said quietly, to no one in particular. Daniel agreed. Daniel. Yes. You said in your study that you weren't warm. That you were working on it. Yes. You're doing better than you think. He didn't answer for a moment. Then, looking straight ahead at the back of the driver's seat, with the smallest possible smile at the corner of his mouth, I'm motivated. Claire laughed. It surprised her. It came out half a sob and half a laugh, and her hand went to her stomach without her thinking about it, and she laughed again. 4 heartbeats. Whatever came next, she was not facing it alone. The workup took 10 days. Blood draws, hormone panels, a hysterosalpingogram with imaging that Dr. Okonkwo wanted personally, a referral to a reproductive endocrinologist for a second opinion on the old films, and a careful review of every medication Claire had taken in the past 5 years. Daniel went to every appointment. He did not hover. He did not ask questions that were not his to ask. He sat in waiting rooms with his laptop open, working, and when she came out he closed it and listened. On the 11th day, Dr. Okonkwo called them in. I have most of an answer for you, she said, settling into her chair. Not all. But most. She opened a folder. Mrs. Yates. The previous diagnoses of severe bilateral tubal occlusion were not wrong. The films from your prior clinics are clear. At the time those imaging studies were performed, both of your fallopian tubes showed substantial blockage consistent with chronic inflammation, likely from a low-grade infection that went undiagnosed for years. All right. The current imaging shows something different. The right tube is still substantially compromised. The left tube shows what we call spontaneous recanalization. The body, over time, reopened a passage through scar tissue that had previously been closed. This happens. It is uncommon. It is more likely in patients whose original blockage was inflammatory rather than structural. It is essentially impossible to predict and it is rarely caught, because most patients with your prior diagnosis stop tracking ovulation and stop having reason to discover the change. Claire's hand went to her mouth. So my left tube opened. At some point in the last 12 to 18 months, based on the tissue characteristics. Possibly earlier. We cannot date it precisely. And the 4. Dr. Okonkwo allowed herself the smallest professional smile. That is the second part of the answer. The hormonal panel from your old IVF cycles, combined with the medications you were on as recently as 8 months ago, produced what we call a delayed hyperstimulation response. It is rare but documented. In a small percentage of patients, the ovaries remain hypersensitive for many months after the formal end of treatment. Combined with a newly patent tube and a single ovulatory cycle in which multiple eggs released and were fertilized, you ended up with a polyzygotic conception. 4 separate eggs. 4 separate fertilizations. 4 separate sacs. She set the folder down. In short, Mrs. Yates, your body did something that was statistically unlikely at every step. The tube reopened. The ovaries over-responded. Multiple eggs released and were fertilized in the same cycle. Each event, on its own, is rare. The combination is what you are carrying. There is no medical mystery here in the supernatural sense. There is a chain of low probability events that happen to occur in the same body in the same month. Claire let out a long, shaky breath. And the father, Dr. Okonkwo said, is a separate question, and one I will not ask you to answer in this office. But I will say this much, because it is medically relevant. Mr. Whitfield, the records you provided from your post-accident reproductive consultation are consistent with what you described to your wife. Severely reduced function. Severely is not 0. It never was. Your specialists at the time appear to have been quite careful about that distinction in writing, even if the verbal communication may have been less precise. Daniel's jaw tightened. In a single cycle, in a body with severely reduced function, the probability of a viable conception event is extremely low. But not zero. And in a cycle in which conception occurred at all, it occurred under the unusual ovarian conditions I just described, which means a single viable event was sufficient to fertilize multiple available eggs. Claire turned to look at Daniel. He was very still. Dr. Okonkwo, he said, and his voice was very controlled, you are telling me that these are biologically my children. I am telling you that the medical record before me is consistent with that possibility. A paternity test will give you a definitive answer if you want one. Many couples in unusual circumstances choose to do them for medical history reasons even when there is no question of fidelity. I would recommend it for the children's records, regardless. I see. The remaining question, she went on gently, is when. The conception window for a 6-week pregnancy puts us at approximately 4 weeks before the first ultrasound. Mrs. Yates, can you think of any incident in that window, medical, accidental, or otherwise, in which exposure could have occurred? Claire opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. There was, she said slowly. There was the gala. And after the gala. She stopped. She thought back. Hard. The night of the gala, she had come home, taken off her heels, and sat in the foyer. Daniel had come to a stop in front of her in the foyer and said thank you for not walking out at all. And she had said I'm not running, Daniel. And he had looked at her for a long moment, and rolled past her toward his suite. That was what she remembered. But there was another piece. A piece she had not let herself think about, because she had assumed it was a dream. Late that night, she had woken with a low fever and a dull, throbbing headache. A migraine, she had thought, she had been getting them on and off for months. She had stumbled into the kitchen at some hour past midnight to find water and the migraine medication she kept in the cabinet. She had been disoriented. The kitchen had been dark. She remembered taking a pill, 2 pills, and going back to bed. The next morning she had woken in her own bed. Headache gone. She had not thought about it again. But she had not, until this moment, double-checked which bottle she had taken from. Daniel. Yes. The night of the gala. After we got home. I had a migraine. I took medication from the kitchen cabinet. His face changed. Which cabinet? The upper left. Where I keep my. Claire. His voice was very quiet. The upper left cabinet is where my caregiver keeps the medications she stages for me at the end of each day. Sleep aids. Pain management. There is a box on the upper shelf with my muscle relaxant prescription. Below it, on the second shelf, your migraine medication. They have similar packaging. I have asked her 3 times to move them. Claire stared at him. What does the muscle relaxant? It's heavy. It's prescribed for spasticity. It also has a sedative effect. The dose I take is calibrated for my weight and tolerance. For someone who has not taken it before, 2 tablets would be, he stopped. 2 tablets would be sufficient to produce significant sedation. And confusion. And memory gaps. The room went very quiet. Dr. Okonkwo, with the practiced delicacy of a physician who had seen many things, said, I'm going to step out for a moment. Please take whatever time you need. I'll be at the nurse's station when you're ready. She left, closing the door behind her. Claire sat in her chair, her hand pressed against her mouth. Daniel. Yes. Did you? No. His voice was flat. Claire. No. I did not come into your room that night. I have not come into your room any night. He stopped, and she watched him gather himself with visible effort. I want to be very precise with you, because what we are discussing matters. I went to bed that night roughly 20 minutes after you did. I have no memory of leaving my room. He stopped again. I have, on rare occasions, taken my evening medication and had what my neurologist calls parasomnia events. Sleepwalking, essentially, but more limited because of my mobility. They are uncommon. They have happened perhaps 4 times in the last 3 years, all of them documented because my caregiver has noticed when items in the apartment have been moved overnight and I had no memory of moving them. Claire stared at him. You are saying. I am saying that I do not know what happened that night, and I am not going to pretend that I do. I am saying that I went to bed having had 2 glasses of champagne at the gala, which I almost never do, and having taken my evening medication on top of that, which I should not have done. I am saying that you and I were both, that night, in altered states neither of us chose precisely. I am saying that I have no memory of doing anything, and I am saying that I cannot promise you nothing happened, because I do not know. His hands were tight on the arms of his chair. I am also saying, he continued, his voice very steady, that if anything did happen, it happened without your conscious consent and without my conscious knowledge, and that is not something I will ever be at peace with. Whatever the medical record says is possible about my body, it is not a defense. I want you to understand that I understand that. Claire's eyes filled. She thought about it. She thought about the sequence. A migraine, real and ordinary. A wrong cabinet, a wrong bottle. 2 tablets of a medication she did not know was a sedative. A man in another room who had taken his own dose and had a documented history of rare nighttime confusion. 2 people who had both been told, by every authority in their lives, that their bodies were closed for business. 2 people who had spent 2 months being so careful with each other that they had not even allowed themselves to want. A door, perhaps. A few minutes, perhaps. Neither of them remembering. Neither of them choosing. And 4 heartbeats. Daniel, she said. Yes. I am not going to spend the rest of this pregnancy, or the rest of my life, deciding whether to be angry about something neither of us remembers and neither of us chose. I am not going to let what was probably an accident become a wound I carry on top of everything else. His face did not change, but something in his eyes did. I want you to do 2 things, she said. First. Move the medication. Today. Permanently. Both of ours. Lock yours up if you have to. Done. Second. I want you to talk to your neurologist about the parasomnia. About whether there is anything that can be done about your dosing or your routine. Not because I think you are dangerous. Because I think you are carrying something heavy right now that you do not have to carry alone. He closed his eyes briefly. Yes. And third, her voice caught. Daniel, these are your children. If the test confirms it. They are your children, and they were not conceived in any way either of us would have planned, and they were not conceived in any way either of us would have chosen, but they are here. 4 of them. And I am not going to spend the next 34 weeks treating them like the result of a tragedy. I am going to treat them like what they are. Which is mine, she said. And, if you want them, yours. He looked at her for a long moment. I want them, he said quietly. They drove home in silence. Not a heavy silence. The other kind. The kind that held 2 people who had just walked through something together and come out the other side still standing. In the car, Daniel reached over and took her hand. He did not let go for the entire ride home. Part 8, The Family. Daniel's family found out 2 weeks later. Claire had not wanted to tell anyone yet. 12 weeks was the standard milestone, and with 4 she was already on a different calendar than ordinary pregnancies, and Dr. Okonkwo had advised her to keep her circle small until the 2nd trimester was firmly underway. Daniel had agreed without hesitation. But families are not always controllable. Daniel's mother, Eleanor Whitfield, was a woman Claire had met exactly twice. The first meeting had been at a brief, formal lunch shortly after the courthouse marriage. Eleanor had flown in from Boston, examined Claire across a tablecloth for 90 minutes, asked 3 questions that were not quite cruel but not quite warm, and flown back the same day. The second meeting had been a phone call on Claire's birthday, in which Eleanor had wished her well in the same tone one uses with a slightly disappointing employee. Claire had understood, from those 2 encounters, that Daniel's mother had not approved of the marriage, did not approve of her, and was in a holding pattern of polite tolerance that could become something else at any moment. That moment arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Claire was home early, on Dr. Okonkwo's orders, to begin reducing her work hours. She was in the kitchen making tea when the private elevator chimed and the doors opened, and Eleanor Whitfield walked into the apartment without warning, without calling ahead, and without breaking her stride. She was dressed, as always, like she had stepped out of a corporate boardroom. Cream silk blouse. Navy slacks. Pearls. Her hair was a perfect silver bob. She set a small overnight bag in the foyer with the air of a woman who fully intended to use it. Claire. Good. You're here. Eleanor. Claire set down the kettle. Her hand went, automatically, to her stomach, still flat enough that nothing showed under her loose sweater. I didn't know you were in town. I wasn't. Now I am. Eleanor's eyes swept the apartment with proprietary efficiency. Where is Daniel? In his study. On a call. He should be done in about an hour. Then you and I will have tea. It was not a request. Claire poured a second cup. They sat at the kitchen island. Eleanor took her tea black, no sugar, no comment. She watched Claire over the rim of her cup with the patient, assessing gaze of a woman who had spent 40 years running boards and reading ledgers. Claire. I'll come to the point. I have been hearing things. What kind of things? The kind of things that always reach me eventually. Eleanor set her cup down. A friend of mine sits on the board at the maternal fetal medicine practice my son's wife has apparently been visiting. She does not, of course, share patient information. But she did happen to mention, in passing, that Dr. Okonkwo has taken on an unusual case recently. And she did happen to mention the surname. And here we are. Claire's blood went cold. That's a serious breach of patient privacy. It is a tea-time observation between old friends, and it is not actionable, and it is not why I am here. Eleanor's voice was cool. I am here because if my son's wife is pregnant, my son and I are going to have a conversation about it, and I would prefer to begin that conversation with the wife before I begin it with the son. So I will ask you directly. Are you pregnant? Claire considered, for a half second, denying it. She decided against it. Eleanor would find out within weeks regardless. Lying now would only give her more weapons. Yes. How far? 8 weeks. And the father. Claire's hand tightened on her cup. Daniel. Eleanor's expression did not change. But something behind her eyes did, and a small, sharp recalculation, like a woman watching a number on a balance sheet shift in a direction she had not expected. Claire. My son's medical condition has been thoroughly reviewed by his specialists and by mine. The medical record is consistent with paternity. We will be doing a confirmatory test for the children's records. I am happy to share the results with you when we have them. That is not. Eleanor. Claire set down her cup. Her voice was steady, and quieter than she had expected it to be. I am going to say something to you, and I would like you to hear me, because we are about to be in each other's lives in a way neither of us anticipated, and I would like for it to go well if it can. Eleanor's eyebrows lifted a fraction. I have been someone's daughter-in-law before, Claire continued. I was not good at it. Not because I did not try, but because the family I married into had decided, before I arrived, that my body was going to be the thing they evaluated me by. They evaluated me by it for 5 years. They found me wanting. My ex-husband cheated on me, his mother told me I was barren and worthless, and they moved on with their lives. I came out of that marriage with a piece of paper and a great deal of clarity about what I will and will not accept from a family in the future. She met Eleanor's eyes directly. I am not going to do that again. I am carrying 4 children. 4. The pregnancy is high risk. Dr. Okonkwo has told me in plain language that the most important thing my body needs right now is not to be under stress. So I am going to tell you, with respect, what the rules are going to be. Eleanor said nothing. But she was listening. You may visit. You may be involved. You may be a grandmother to these children if you want to be one. I would like that for them. I did not have grandparents, and I would not deny them anything I can give them. But you will not interrogate me. You will not test me. You will not use my body or my history or the circumstances of this pregnancy as a tool to evaluate whether I am worthy of your son. That ship sailed on the day we signed the marriage certificate, and frankly, it sailed a long time before that, when your son made the decision to marry me without asking your permission. You may take that up with him. You will not take it up with me. She paused. Took a breath. I am going to ask you something now, and I would like you to think before you answer. Go on. Do you want to be a grandmother to these children? Yes or no? Eleanor stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched. That is a very direct question, Eleanor said finally. It is the only one that matters. The older woman picked up her teacup. Set it down. Picked it up again. Looked out the window at the gray afternoon light over the sound. Claire. I will tell you something that I have not told my son, and that I would prefer you not repeat to him, although I understand you may. After Daniel's accident, I spent 2 years preparing myself for the possibility that I would never have grandchildren. I made my peace with it. I told myself that it was a small price compared to the price he had paid, and that I would not allow myself to grieve a future that had not been promised to me. I have lived in that peace for 6 years. She set the cup down very carefully. You are now telling me that the peace was unnecessary. That my son will, in fact, be a father. Of 4. To a woman I do not know well, under circumstances that, by your own implication, are unusual. Yes. You will forgive me if my first reaction is not warmth. I have spent 6 years training myself out of hope. Hope is not something I can put back on like a coat. Claire's throat tightened, unexpectedly. I understand. But... Eleanor turned to look at her. Her eyes were not warm, but they were not cold either. They were something Clare had not seen in them before, tired, and very human. I am not a fool, Clare. I know what my son told you about himself when you married him. I know what he believed to be true. I know what he has and has not lived through. And I know that the woman in front of me right now is not the one I had lunch with 3 months ago. The one I had lunch with 3 months ago was performing a marriage. The one I am having tea with now is in one. Clare didn't know what to say to that. I am going to answer your question, Eleanor continued. Yes. I want to be a grandmother to these children. I do not know how to be one yet. I have not had practice. I will likely, in your view, do it badly at first. I am asking you, in advance, to give me some grace while I learn. In return, I will give you the same grace while you learn what kind of daughter-in-law you are going to be to a family that, as you correctly point out, you did not choose. Clare let out a breath she had not realized she had been holding. All right. And Clare. Yes. For the record. I am not the woman who told you you were barren. I have never used that word. About anyone. Eleanor's voice was very steady. I do not approve of women who use it. If we are going to do this, I want that on the record between us, because I will not be confused with someone else's mother-in-law for the next 30 years. Clare surprised herself by laughing. It came out small and watery. Noted. Eleanor nodded once. Now, she said. Tell me about Dr. Okonkwo. I have not heard her name before. I would like to know who is taking care of my grandchildren. When Daniel came out of his study an hour later, he found his mother and his wife at the kitchen island, a teapot between them, having a measured, careful, unsentimental conversation about high-risk obstetrics. He stopped in the doorway and watched them for a moment without being noticed. Eleanor saw him first. Daniel. Sit down. Your wife and I have been getting acquainted. She tells me I am going to have 4 grandchildren. I have a great many questions for you, and we are going to begin with the medication cabinet. Daniel rolled his chair to the island, looked at Clare, and raised an eyebrow. Clare shrugged, very slightly. I told her enough. Not everything. He nodded. Mother, he said. Tea? I have tea. I want answers. Then I will get my own tea, and we will begin. He did. And they did. And for the first time since the marriage had begun, Clare watched her husband and his mother speak to each other the way 2 adults speak when they have decided, mutually and without saying so, that the terms of their relationship are about to change. She sat at the island with her hand on her stomach and listened, and she thought, this is a family. This is what a family looks like when it is repairing itself. For heartbeats, somewhere under her hand, kept their own quiet time. By the 12th week, Clare's body had begun to show in earnest. Her abdomen was noticeably larger than a standard singleton pregnancy at the same stage. Dr. Okonkwo said this was normal, a quadruplet uterus was not on the standard growth curve. Clare had started wearing loose dresses, had cut her work hours down to 4 a day, and spent the rest of the time resting at home. Daniel had set up a recliner for her by the living room window, with her books beside it and a thermos of water that was always full. She had thought she had closed the door on the past. Until a Thursday afternoon, when she came back from a prenatal appointment and saw Mitchell standing in the lobby of her building. He was beside the front desk in an ill-fitting suit, his hair thinner than she remembered, his face an unhealthy gray. The moment he saw her, he came at her almost in a lunge. Clare. I've been waiting all afternoon. The front desk wouldn't let me up. Clare stopped walking. Her hand went, automatically, to her stomach. The bump was clearly visible now, her coat could not hide it. Mitchell's eyes dropped to her midsection and his entire body locked up. You, his voice cracked. You're pregnant. Mitchell. What are you doing here? You're pregnant. He said it again, louder, as if repetition would change something. A few of the residents passing through the lobby slowed. Claire, the doctors said you couldn't. Lower your voice. She kept hers calm. If you have something to say, you can say it outside. I am not having this conversation in my building. Your building. He laughed, and the sound had no humor in it. Right. Your building. She turned and walked back out the way she had come in. After a moment, she heard him follow. There was a small park across the street with a few benches. She sat down on one. He stood in front of her, not sitting. How far along are you? He said. That is none of your business. Claire, look at me. Look at the size of you. That is not 3 months. That is, what, 5? 6? His face was doing something complicated. We were married 6 months ago. We were together 6 months ago, before you signed those papers. So either that baby is mine, or you were sleeping with someone before our divorce was final, or... Mitchell. Her voice cut him off cleanly. Stop. She looked up at him. She kept her hands folded on her lap, on top of her coat, over the swell of her stomach. I am 12 weeks pregnant, she said. 12. Not 5, not 6. I have the medical records. The conception happened well after our divorce was finalized. The children, are not yours. Not biologically, not legally, not in any sense that has any claim on me. Whatever you came here to accuse me of, the dates do not support it. Children. He caught the word. Plural. She did not answer. He stared at her stomach again. His mouth worked silently for a moment. Claire. Please. His voice changed. The edge dropped out of it, replaced with something thinner and uglier. I need to talk to you. Not about the baby. About something else. Please. She watched him. The Mitchell standing in front of her was not the Mitchell she had divorced. That Mitchell had been arrogant, righteous, certain that the world owed him a son and that she was the obstacle. This Mitchell looked like a man who had spent 6 months sleeping badly. You have 5 minutes, she said. He sat down on the bench, not next to her, on the one facing hers. He put his face in his hands for a moment. Lacey lost the baby, he said. Claire said nothing. 12 weeks. She made it to 12 weeks and then she lost it. 2 months ago. He did not look up. And then she left. She said she couldn't be with me. She said the whole thing had been a mistake. She blamed me for the stress. She said her family had warned her about getting involved with a married man and she should have listened. Claire kept her hands folded. She did not speak. And then my mother, his voice cracked again. My mother started in. About how it was karma. About how we should have handled it differently. About how we should have stayed with you and tried longer, or done another round of IVF, or something. She started saying I had thrown away a good wife for a girl who couldn't even hold a pregnancy. She says it every time she calls. Every day. Every single day, Claire. Mitchell. And then last week I heard from a guy at work that you'd married some rich guy in a wheelchair, and I thought, fine, she's moved on, that's fair, I deserve that. And then today I came by because I was going to ask if you would meet me for a coffee, just to talk, and I see you walking into that building looking like that. Mitchell. And I just need to know, Claire. I need to know how. Because they told us, 3 different doctors told us, that you couldn't. And now I see you and you're carrying more than one, and I just, how? How is this fair? He finally looked up at her. His eyes were red. Claire looked at him for a long, long time. She felt, somewhere underneath her ribs, a small flicker of something she had not expected to feel. Not pity exactly. Not vindication either. Something quieter. The recognition of a man who had built his entire life on the assumption that her body was the broken thing, and who was now sitting on a park bench discovering that the broken thing had not been her. Mitchell, she said. I am going to say this once, and then I am going to go home, and you are not going to come back to this building or contact me again. He waited. You asked me how this is fair. It is not a question I owe you an answer to. But I will give you one anyway, because I think you need to hear it from someone, and your mother clearly is not the person to give it to you. She kept her voice level. It is fair because life is not a ledger. You did not earn a child by being married to me, and I did not fail to produce one because I was deficient. The doctors who told us I could not conceive were looking at a real condition. The condition changed. Bodies change. Mine did. Yours did not produce a child with Lacey, and that is not karma, and it is not a punishment, it is just what happened. There is no balance sheet here. There is no scoreboard. There is only what is, and what each of us does with it. Claire. I am not finished. He stopped. You came here today thinking that if these were your children, you might have leverage. Some claim. Some way back into a life that you walked out of. They are not yours. They will never be yours. The man whose name is on my marriage certificate will be their father, and he will be a good one, and you will not be in their lives in any capacity, ever. Do you understand? Claire, I wasn't. Do you understand? He looked at her. Something in his face collapsed. Yes. Good. She stood, slowly, with one hand braced on the back of the bench. Mitchell. The last thing I will say to you is this. I hope you build something real with the rest of your life. I do not say that out of generosity. I say it because the alternative is that you spend the next 40 years sitting on benches asking women why their lives went better than yours, and that is a small life, and I would not wish it on anyone, even you. She turned and walked back across the street. She did not look back. She heard him say her name once, quietly. She kept walking. She made it into the lobby, into the elevator, into her own foyer, before her hands started shaking. She sat down on the bench by the door and pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed. Daniel found her there 10 minutes later, when he came out of his study to ask her how the appointment had gone. He took one look at her face, rolled his chair across the foyer, and stopped in front of her. What happened? Mitchell, she said. His jaw set. Where? Lobby. Then the park across the street. He's gone now. What did he want? To find out if the babies were his. She let out a small, exhausted breath. And to tell me his life is falling apart. And to ask me, somehow, to make it make sense for him. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Did he upset you? He tried. She looked up at him. I don't think he succeeded. I think I said what I needed to say. I am tired, Daniel. I am so tired of the past walking up to me on the street. He reached for her hand. She gave it to him. I will speak to building security, he said. His face goes on the no-entry list. If he comes back, he will not get past the curb. All right. And Claire. Yes. You did well. She let out a small laugh that was almost a sob. How would you know? You weren't there. I know you, he said simply. That is enough. Part 10, the bed rest. By the 20th week, Dr. Okonkwo put Claire on partial bed rest. Her blood pressure had crept up. Not dangerously, but enough that the specialist wanted her off her feet for most of each day. She gave notice at the publishing house. Her manager, who had been quietly accommodating through the whole pregnancy, sent her off with a card signed by everyone in the editorial department and a small stack of advance reader copies to keep her occupied. Daniel had the guest room reorganized so she could spend most of her day there comfortably. A new adjustable bed. A bedside fridge. A second monitor for her laptop, mounted on a swing arm so she could work from her side. He did not ask whether she wanted any of it. He had it done one Tuesday while she was at an appointment, and when she came home he simply gestured at the room and said, "Tell me what else you need." She started, slowly, to need less from him in the way of distance, and more from him in the way of presence. He noticed. He adjusted. He started taking lunch in her room instead of his study. He brought a folding tray that fit across his lap, and another that fit across hers, and they ate together in silence or in conversation, depending on how she felt that day. He read to her in the evenings, sometimes as newspaper articles, mostly, things he thought she would find interesting, never anything heavy. She fell asleep more than once with his voice still going. One night, around the 23rd week, she woke at 3 in the morning with a sharp, alarming cramp. She lay still in the dark, breathing carefully, counting. The cramp passed. Another came. She counted again. 8 minutes apart. Then 6. She reached for her phone and called him. He was in her room within 30 seconds, his chair coming through the door before she had even finished saying I think something is wrong. He had clearly slept in his day clothes, the way she had noticed he had been doing lately, in case. Time them, he said, already on his own phone with the building's medical line. How far apart? 6 minutes. Maybe 5 now. How long? 40 seconds. Pain level. 6. Maybe a 7 on the last one. He was speaking into his phone now, calm, clear. Mrs. Whitfield. 23 weeks. Quadruplet. Contractions 5 to 6 minutes, 40 seconds, escalating. I need the ambulance and I need you to call Dr. Okonkwo's service and have her meet us at the hospital. He hung up. He took her hand. They are coming. The car will be downstairs in 7 minutes. Faster than the ambulance. We will go in the car. The ambulance will follow as backup. Daniel. Breathe. In. Hold. Out. She breathed. Daniel, it's too early. I know. 23 weeks is too early. I know. They will stop it if they can. Dr. Okonkwo is very good. We are going to go now. Can you walk? Yes. Slowly. Lean on the chair. I am going to roll alongside you. Do not try to carry anything. Bag is by the door. Driver will get it. She leaned on the back of his chair as they moved through the apartment. The hall lights came on automatically. Somewhere behind them, she could hear his caregiver, summoned by the call, moving through the apartment to lock up after them. The elevator opened. The car was already in the underground garage, the driver standing by the open door. In the car, Daniel kept her hand. He did not let go for the entire ride to the hospital. He counted contractions out loud with her, in a low, even voice, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. When they wheeled her into triage, he was beside her. When Dr. Okonkwo arrived 20 minutes later, hair still damp from being woken, he was beside her. When the magnesium sulfate drip started and Claire began to sweat and shake from the medication, he was beside her, his hand on her wrist, his voice low, this is the medication. This is what it does. It is working. Breathe. The contractions slowed. Then stopped. Dr. Okonkwo came in around dawn, looking tired but satisfied. We caught it. The contractions have stopped. The babies are stable. All 4 heartbeats strong. Cervix is unchanged. We are going to keep you for 48 hours of monitoring, and then I am going to send you home on full bed rest until further notice. No more partial. No more half days. Bed, bathroom, occasional shower, that is the menu now. Understood, Claire whispered. Mr. Whitfield. Yes. Has she been under any unusual stress in the last week? Daniel's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Her ex-husband approached her in our building lobby 12 days ago. There was a confrontation. There has been some residual phone contact, messages from his mother, mostly. We have been managing it. I will manage it more aggressively starting today. Dr. Okonkwo nodded once. Manage it more aggressively, she said. Whatever that means in your vocabulary. It means it stops, Daniel said. Good. She left. Claire turned her head on the pillow to look at him. What does manage it more aggressively mean? It means, he said evenly, that I am going to have my attorney send a formal cease and desist to your former mother-in-law, and that if she ignores it, I will have her served. It means that any further contact from any member of that family, by any channel, will be met with legal response. It means that the next time I find out something has reached you that should not have, I am going to assume the wall I built around you is not high enough, and I am going to build a higher one. She looked at him for a long moment. Daniel. Yes. Thank you. Sleep, he said. She closed her eyes. When she woke a few hours later, he was still there. His chair was parked beside her bed. He had fallen asleep with his head tipped back against the headrest, one hand still loosely curled around hers on the blanket. She did not move. She watched him sleep for a long time. Somewhere under the blanket, for hearts kept their own steady time. The next 10 weeks were the longest of Clare's life. Bed rest, it turned out, was not a metaphor. It was a literal sentence to a single piece of furniture, with brief paroled excursions to the bathroom and, once a day, the shower. Dr. Okonkwo had been precise about what she meant. Daniel had been precise about enforcing it. He hired a daytime nurse, a calm, broad-shouldered woman named Patricia, who came in at 7 each morning and stayed until 7 each evening. Patricia took blood pressure readings 4 times a day, monitored fetal heart rates twice a day with a portable Doppler, kept a log that Dr. Okonkwo's office reviewed weekly, and made sure Clare ate every 2 hours whether she felt like it or not. Daniel handled the rest. He had moved his work entirely into the apartment. He took his calls in his study with the door open, so he could hear if she called for him. He ate his meals on the folding tray beside her bed. In the evenings, after Patricia left, he was the one who helped her shift positions, who brought her water, who read to her until she fell asleep. She had stopped being embarrassed by the intimacy of it somewhere around the 25th week. There was no room for embarrassment. Her body was a vessel doing impossible work, and she could not afford the energy it took to be self-conscious about needing help. What surprised her was that he did not seem embarrassed either. He had been, in the early days of their marriage, a man who kept careful distances. The distances had not collapsed all at once. They had eroded, one small accommodation at a time, until one evening around the 28th week she realized that he had been sitting beside her bed reading aloud from a biography of Frederick Douglass for over an hour, and that his free hand had been resting on her ankle through the blanket the entire time, and that neither of them had remarked on it or moved. She did not remark on it then either. She just listened to his voice and watched the soft lamp light move across his face, and let the new shape of her marriage settle around her without comment. Eleanor came twice a week. She flew in from Boston on Tuesdays and Fridays, stayed in a hotel 2 blocks away, and spent 4 hours each visit sitting in the chair by Clare's bed. She brought books. She brought soup from a delicatessen Clare had once mentioned liking. She did not, as Clare had feared, interrogate her about anything. What she did, instead, was talk. Eleanor talked about Daniel as a child. About the summer he was 7 and broke his arm falling out of a tree he had been told not to climb. About the year he was 14 and refused to speak to her for 3 months because she had thrown out a sweatshirt of his that she had thought was a dish rag. About the day, 2 weeks after the accident, when she had walked into his hospital room and found him staring at the ceiling, and he had told her, without looking at her, that she should go home and stop pretending this was going to get better. I did not go home, Eleanor said, looking out the window. I sat there for 6 hours. He did not speak to me again that day. But I did not go home, and I came back the next day, and the next. He never thanked me for it. He has never mentioned it. But he knows I did not go home. Clare watched her. Why are you telling me this, Eleanor? Eleanor turned to look at her. Because my son is a man who does not say the things he feels. I was the same way at his age. His father was the same way until the day he died. We are not a family of declarations. We are a family of staying in the room. I am telling you the things he will never tell you, because you are carrying his children and you deserve to know what kind of man he is when nobody is watching. I know what kind of man he is. Then I am telling you for my own sake, Eleanor said. Because I am 68 years old and I have spent 40 of those years not saying things, and I would like, before these children arrive, to have practiced saying some of them out loud to someone. Clare reached out, slowly, across the blanket. Eleanor looked at her hand for a moment. Then, with a small, embarrassed shake of her head, she took it. They sat that way for a little while, not speaking. The babies grew. Dr. Okonkwo's weekly scans showed all 4 progressing on the kind of curve that, given the circumstances, qualified as miraculous. They had names by the 30th week, in the abstract way one names things one has not yet met. Baby A, the largest, would be Eleanor, after Daniel's mother, who had cried briefly and then pretended she had not when Clare told her. Baby B, the next, would be Margaret, after the great-aunt who had unwittingly set up the blind date. Baby C, the smallest, would be Grace. Baby D, the only boy, would be Walter, after Daniel's godfather from the gala, who had sent flowers to the hospital after the early labor scare with a card that said only, tell her to keep them in there. Eleanor. Margaret. Grace. Walter. Daniel had asked once whether she wanted to name any of them after anyone in her own family. Clare had thought about it for a long moment and then shaken her head. My mother died when I was 19. I do not have anyone I want to name a child after. I have people I want to give a child to. It is not the same thing. He had nodded and not pressed. At 31 weeks and 4 days, Claire's water broke. It was a Sunday morning. She was eating toast in bed. Patricia was in the kitchen warming up a second cup of broth. Daniel was in his study on a brief work call. There was no warning. Just a sudden, warm, unmistakable rush, and a sharp intake of breath from Clare that brought Patricia running. Patricia. I see it. Stay still. Mr. Whitfield. Daniel was in the doorway in seconds. Patricia was already on the phone with Dr. Okonkwo's emergency line. The car was already being summoned. The hospital bag, packed and repacked and packed again over the past month, was already by the door. This time, there was no debate about whether to go in by ambulance. They went straight in by car, with Patricia in the front seat coordinating with the hospital and Daniel in the back with Claire, holding her hand, his thumb moving slowly over her knuckles. Daniel. Yes. 31 weeks. Is that? Dr. Okonkwo said anything past 30 was good. We are past 31. We are well into good. All 4 of them. All 4 of them. All 4 heartbeats this morning were strong. Patricia checked at 6. Daniel. Yes. I am scared. I know. What if? Claire. He squeezed her hand. Listen to me. We are going to a hospital where the team has been preparing for this delivery for months. Dr. Okonkwo is meeting us. The neonatal team has 4 warmers and 4 teams ready. Whatever happens in the next several hours, you are not going to be alone for any of it, and they are not going to be alone for any of it. I will be in the room with you. Patricia will be in the room with you. We are going to get through this. She nodded. She did not trust her voice. He lifted her hand to his mouth and kissed the back of it, very briefly, and set it down again. It was the first time he had ever done that. She did not have the words to react. She just held on tighter. The cesarean was performed at 3 in the afternoon. Claire was awake for it, behind the blue surgical drape, with Daniel beside her head in his chair, his hand on hers. The anesthesiologist had set him up at exactly the right height. Dr. Okonkwo had clearly orchestrated this in advance. Claire could not feel the surgery. She could feel pressure. She could feel a kind of distant pulling. She heard Dr. Okonkwo's voice on the other side of the drape, calm and clipped, calling out times and conditions. Baby A out. 3:27. Cry good. Color good. Going to warmer 1. A thin, indignant wail. Claire closed her eyes. Tears slid sideways into her hair. Baby B out. 3:28. Cry good. Color good. Going to warmer 2. Another wail, slightly higher in pitch than the first. Daniel's hand tightened around hers. Baby C out. 3:29. No cry yet. Suction. Stimulation. The room went very quiet. Claire's heart stopped. Cry. Good cry. Color coming. Going to warmer 3. A thinner, more uncertain sound. But a sound. Claire let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Baby D out. 3:30. Cry good. Color good. Going to warmer 4. The loudest cry yet. A boy's cry, somehow, though Claire would not have been able to say why she could tell. All 4 out, all 4 breathing, all 4 going to NICU for evaluation, Dr. Okonkwo said over the drape. Mom is doing well. Closing now. Mr. Whitfield, do you want to see them before they go up? Daniel looked at Claire. Go, she whispered. Go. Tell me what they look like. He went. He came back 5 minutes later, his face changed in a way she had never seen before. Claire. Yes. They are very small. I know. They are very, very small. But they are perfect. All 4. Eleanor has your nose. Margaret has more hair than the others. Grace is the smallest but the loudest. Walter, his voice caught. He took a breath and started again. Walter looked at me. I know they say newborns can't focus, I know that. But he looked at me, Claire. She was crying. She could not stop. Daniel. Yes. Did we do it? You did it, he said. You did it. 4. All 4. She closed her eyes and let the tears come, and somewhere on the other side of the drape, Dr. Okonkwo and her team kept working, and somewhere upstairs, 4 small, impossible lives were beginning their first hour outside her body. Part 12, The Beginning. The NICU stay was 43 days. Eleanor came home first, at 2 weeks. Margaret followed 3 days later. Walter, the largest at birth and the strongest from the start, came home at 3 weeks. Grace, the smallest, the one who had not cried right away, stayed the longest. She had a brief setback in week 4 with a respiratory infection that put her back on oxygen for 5 days. Claire and Daniel took turns sleeping in the NICU family room for that stretch. Eleanor flew in and stayed at the apartment with the other 3, with a rotating team of nurses and her own grandmotherly stubbornness. Grace came home on day 43. The apartment, which had once felt cold and too large, was now full of small sounds. The thin reedy cry of a hungry baby. The hum of 4 monitors. The soft clatter of bottles being prepared. Patricia had stayed on, now joined by 2 additional nurses on rotating shifts, because 4 newborns at 31 weeks adjusted required, as Dr. Okonkwo had put it, the staffing of a small clinic. Daniel had given over an entire wing of the penthouse to the nursery. 4 bassinets. 4 small dressers. A long, low changing station designed at chair height so he could reach it. A pair of identical rocking chairs by the window, one of which he had sat in exactly once, the day Grace came home, holding her against his chest while she slept. He had not moved for 2 hours. Claire had taken a photograph of it from the doorway. It was the first photograph she had ever taken of him. The picture sat on his desk now. Claire's recovery was slow but steady. Dr. Okonkwo had warned her that her body would need a year, possibly more, to feel like itself again. Claire was not in a hurry. She slept when she could. She ate what Patricia put in front of her. She held babies. She let other people hold babies. She let Eleanor, who had moved into a long-term rental 3 blocks away, take an entire shift each evening so she could sleep. She did not return to work. The publishing house had offered her freelance editing she could do from home. She had accepted 2 manuscripts and was working through them at her own pace. She thought, eventually, she might want more. For now, 4 was enough. 6 months after the babies came home, on a quiet Saturday morning, Claire was on the couch with Walter asleep on her chest. Daniel was in his chair across from her, Eleanor in the crook of one arm and Grace in the crook of the other, both of them recently fed and milky-faced and on the edge of sleep. Margaret was in the bouncer at his feet, kicking at a stuffed rabbit. It was a rare moment of all 4 of them being calm at the same time. Daniel looked across at her. Claire. I want to tell you something. She lifted her head from Walter's small warm weight. All right. I have been trying to figure out when to say this. I thought I would wait until everything was less, he gestured, vaguely, at the 4 small humans in the room, but I have realized that everything is not going to be less for some time, and I do not want to wait that long. She waited. I love you, he said. He said it the way he said most things. Even, clear, without ornament. I do not know precisely when it started. Probably the night of the gala. Possibly earlier. I did not name it to myself for a long time. I thought I did not have the right to. I had married you under terms that were not love, and I did not want to renegotiate the contract on you without warning. So I did not say it. She watched him. She did not interrupt. I am saying it now because I have come to think that not saying it is a worse offense than saying it. You should know what kind of marriage you are in. You should know what your husband thinks when he watches you sleep. You should not have to guess. So I am telling you. You can do with it what you want. The apartment was quiet except for Walter's small, snuffling breaths against her collarbone. Claire smiled. She felt something behind her eyes go warm and overflow. Daniel. Yes. I love you too. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was something in his face she had not seen before. A kind of stillness, but not the careful stillness she was used to. The other kind. The kind that came after a long-held breath. When did you know? The night I went into early labor, she said. When you were in my room before I had finished the sentence. When you counted contractions in the car. When you kissed my hand on the way to the hospital and pretended you had not. I thought, this is a man I have been married to for almost a year, and I have only just noticed I am in love with him, and I am about to have 4 of his children. It struck me as bad timing. And you did not say anything. I did not want to say it from a hospital bed. I wanted to say it sitting on a couch. With our children in the room. So I waited. He laughed. It was a real laugh, low and surprised, and it startled Eleanor, who opened her eyes briefly and then closed them again. Claire. Yes. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for going first. He looked down at the 2 small daughters in his arms. Then at Margaret kicking at her rabbit. Then at Walter, asleep on Claire's chest. Then back at her. We did this, he said. We did. I would not have predicted any of it. No. I am glad we did it anyway. Me too. He did not say anything else for a while. Neither did she. The morning light moved slowly across the floor of the living room. Somewhere down the hall, Patricia was humming as she folded laundry. Margaret kicked her rabbit and made a small, pleased sound. Outside the window, the city went about its ordinary Saturday business, unaware that on the top floor of one of its glass towers, a woman who had once been told she was barren was holding the smallest of her 4 impossible children, and her husband, who had once been told he would never be a father, was holding 2 of the others. For hearts, +2, kept their own quiet time. Epilogue. 3 years later, on a bright morning in early autumn, Claire sat on a bench in the small park across the street from their building. Eleanor was teaching Walter how to climb the lower rung of the playground ladder. Margaret was supervising, hands on her hips and very serious. Grace, who had been the smallest and was now somehow the boldest, was hanging upside down from the monkey bars while a nanny stood ready beneath her. Daniel rolled up beside the bench and stopped. Eleanor called. She is taking the 4 of them to the aquarium next Saturday. She has informed me that I am not invited because I take too many calls. She is not wrong. She is not. He watched the children for a moment. Walter is going to fall off that ladder. Probably. Should I? No. Let him. He let him. Walter fell off the ladder. Walter cried for approximately 11 seconds. Walter got back on the ladder. Daniel. Yes. Dr. Okonkwo called yesterday. He turned to look at her. The follow-up scan from last month. She wanted to confirm what we discussed. The left tube is still patent. The hormonal panel is in normal range. She says, in her words, that I am a fully functional 34-year-old woman whose body has decided to behave conventionally for the moment. I see. She wanted to know if we had any plans. He was quiet. And what did you say? I said I would discuss it with my husband. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, very slowly, a smile crossed his face. It was the unguarded one, the one he had grown into over the past 3 years, the one their children had given him. Claire. Yes. 4 is a lot. It is. 4 is, in fact, a great deal. It is. Are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you what Dr. Okonkwo said. I am letting you sit with it. We do not have to decide today. We do not have to decide this year. I just thought you should know that the door, as it turns out, is still open. We can leave it open. We can close it. We can stand in front of it for a while. He reached for her hand. She gave it to him. Across the park, Walter had reached the second rung of the ladder. Margaret had climbed up beside him to make sure he did it correctly. Eleanor was now insisting on a turn. Grace was right side up again, dangling from one knee, demonstrating for the nanny how she had learned to do it. Claire. Yes. Whatever you want. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. I have spent 3 years discovering that what I want is whatever you want. It is an inconvenient discovery for a man who used to pride himself on having opinions, but there it is. She laughed. She leaned over and kissed him, briefly, on the corner of his mouth. It was not their first kiss. It had not been their first kiss for a long time now. But it was the first kiss of this particular conversation, and she wanted to mark it. All right, she said. We will leave the door open. For now. For now. And we will see. We will see. She settled back against the bench. He kept her hand. Across the park, for small voices argued cheerfully about whose turn it was. The autumn light was very gold. For hearts, +2, kept their own quiet time. And somewhere, in the careful, unhurried way that real lives are built, a fifth possibility waited, not a promise, not a plan, just a door that had once been closed and was, against every prognosis, no longer.